Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Insider Advice, What Martech Leaders Wish You Knew, with our presenter, Daryl Alfonso. I'm Tao Ngo, SVP Marketing at Brandmaker. In case you didn't know us, Brandmaker provides a marketing operations suite to help marketers plan, budget, execute, and measure marketing. It's my pleasure to introduce Daryl today and maybe make him blush a little with all these accomplishments. Daryl is an award-winning marketer and Martech professional. He was named one of the top Martech marketers to follow in 2020, won the Fearless Marketer Award in 2018, is a two-time Marketo champion, and a certified Salesforce administrator. He's consulted for several Fortune 500 companies, including General Electric, Abbott Laboratories, and currently leads marketing operations at Amazon Web Services. I, like many of you, follow his articles and posts on LinkedIn and always find them insightful. And behind all these accolades, he's just a really down-to-earth person. So I'm really excited to have him present today. Daryl, I'll let you share your screen.
Great, thanks, Tao. Yeah, thanks for having me. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. So yeah, today, everyone, thanks for coming. I wanted to talk about what MarTech leaders wish you knew. This is based on an article that I wrote not too long ago. And what I did was I interviewed some top MarTech leaders around, what are some things that aren't talked about a lot in our one-on-one meetings and in our team meetings that leaders wish you knew about. And I think it addresses something really core and a really pervasive problem today, which is this big disconnect between what leaders are thinking and what leaders want and what the individual contributors or practitioners are doing. But it overall has a good message of helping elevate today's MarTech practitioners. So I'm excited to share these thoughts with you. By the way, I'm coming down with a cold or something. Luckily, I tested negative yesterday, so hopefully I'm okay, but you'll kind of notice that little bit of thing in my voice. So here's the agenda. We'll talk about the growing divide between MarTech leaders and practitioners, and then these different concepts that become so important. And as I was doing these interviews, and as I was thinking about myself and my team, I tried to categorize these different ideas into themes. And they come in the form of perception, business outcomes, team structure, and work overload. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Now, first of all, so what is this concept of, why are MarTech leaders or even marketing leaders becoming more and more separated from practitioners? I think there's two reasons. One is, and this is an unfortunate scenario if you're in it, is that you may have a leader that is potentially unknowledgeable about what happens behind the scenes and about what it actually takes to do great MarTech operations and scale a business with today's digital technology. And if you fall into that camp, it becomes really a large educational effort and almost sort of campaign to get them to understand what it is that we MarTech practitioners do on a daily basis and the impact that it makes. So that's one scenario that you could be in, and I've been in that myself. Whether or not you want to stay in a role like that, it will be really up to you and dependent on your situation. But I will say that if you are in a situation like that, you should devote 30 to 40% of your time to those sort of communication efforts. Otherwise, your great work will go to waste. Now, there's another reason why there's this growing divide between leaders and practitioners, and that's the sort of responsibilities that fall onto the shoulders of these people. So leaders, for example, have this different set of things that they have to think about on a daily basis, whereas practitioners, often the marketing operations folks, right, the ones that I write about so often, and am passionate about, Marketing operations are the people that are actually executing the tasks and the projects. They're the ones making sure that the lights stay on, right? That the Martech system and the entire ecosystem is stable. And also, there's going to be a number of fires, fire drills, emergencies, little things that happen that are unexpected that we're taking care of. But those things aren't necessarily on the radar of a marketing leader, a business leader, or a Martech leader, right? They're looking at, well, I need to hit these objectives for the quarter. Are the teams that we have set up in a way so that we can succeed and hit these? Do I have the right people? You'll notice that your leaders are spending a lot of time on recruiting, on hiring, on management. So there's just a inherent difference that we need to try to bridge. And that's why you may feel like your leaders may not understand the stuff that you're working on. So how can we address this divide, and what are some things that the leaders are trying to say across the field? So we'll start with idea one, or part one, which is the idea of perception. Here's the thing about perception, especially when it comes to Martech and especially when it comes to work. First is that we have to sort of at least acknowledge the fact that to help make sense of work, people bucket teams and tasks into buckets, right? Imagine when you start work or you start a job, you say, okay, well, that's the sales team. That's the Martech team. This is customer success. And we're doing that in order to orient ourselves to the business so that we can, try to understand where everything is. It's almost like coming into a new building, right? The restrooms are over there. The lobby is over there. This is where I go get more pens and paper, right? So we almost stereotype / bucket these people and these teams because it helps us get our jobs done and it helps us not get overwhelmed. The problem is that even after a year, 2 years, people stay in those buckets that we've initially put them in, right? Even though they may have gone beyond that and are starting to contribute or become very instrumental to achieving business goals, but they're still in those buckets from a perception standpoint, right? And that's why I say these buckets will stay the same unless an external force changes them. So as a Martech team or people managing Martech, you may be put into this category of, well, we send the emails, or, well, we generate the reports, or, we push buttons and campaigns go live, right? That's the bucket that we were initially placed in. How do we change that? How do we change that perception? So the first one is to regularly tie what you're doing and what you're working on to the top priorities of the business. And there's a couple of different ways. Ideally, what these are. You know what I mean? These are communicated clearly. And some, like at our company at AWS, we have a platform that actually says, hey, what the goals are at each level. So hopefully you have something like that. If you don't, it's really important to sit down with top leaders, marketing leaders, Martech leaders, and ask them over the next year, what are the top things that are most important to them? And then what you start to do is you start to connect what you're doing and demonstrate that we are helping achieve these goals. But more importantly, one thing that I've found is that you want to try to demonstrate how some of these goals will be at risk without the work that you're doing. And this is a nice way to break it down. If you look at this one right here, you've got tier 1 goals, right? So maybe like the CMO or CRO, VP of sales, will be looking at this as their main goal. And then when you go down to the director level, the director will be thinking about, well, these are going to be my priorities that ladder up to that tier 1 goal. We need to extend our reach. We need to increase our conversions. And then now when we get to the other tiers, these are the practitioner tiers or individual contributor tiers. We have our own goals that we want to hit, and we know which ones that they ladder up to. And this is This is really important. And definitely don't forget the power of, unfortunately, this sort of letting people know the negative side or the converse side, that if these tier 3 goals aren't met, the tier 2 goals are at risk, and therefore the tier 1 goal is at risk. So think about that. One other idea for perception: quarterly business reviews for Martech teams. This is something that we actually do at Amazon. We actually do it monthly. So we call it monthly business reviews. So what's the purpose and what are these? So these are meetings that you have on a regular basis where it's your time to shine and really to explain and demonstrate what you're doing, and contributing for the business. And, it's just a chance to tell people and remind people who you are, what you do, what you're working on, and how it ladders up into those priorities. Here's some ideas of what and by the way, you want to invite as many people as you can, and it's even easier these days with the virtual thing. We've got, at our monthly business reviews, we invite 50 plus stakeholders, executives as high as you can, different teams. So if you invite sales operations, invite analysts, invite sales leaders if you can, right? Different types of marketing leaders for sure. And just overall stakeholders. And here's a few different buckets of what you can report on. Performance, for example, my team owns Marketo at AWS, so we report on email performance, but also roadmaps, product and project roadmaps. A roadmap is essentially a list of things that you commit to delivering over a time period, right? And this roadmap is something that you have buy-in across several different stakeholder teams, and it lets you know, hey, this is how we're progressing on the roadmap that we decided to execute on back at the beginning of the year, and it includes things like builds, integrations, processes, etc. Wins and losses. This is one of my favorites because this gives you the opportunity to say, these are some of the big highlights that we did last quarter. We did this, we supported this user conference. The data issue that we resolved resulted in 12% increased conversion rate. Okay. And you really want to think about this. And then, also don't be afraid to show the improvement areas. Don't be afraid to say, hey, unsubscribe is up this quarter. We lost a key headcount this quarter. You know what I mean? I think it also, when you show the improvement areas, it really shows, the human side that we all are and we're all working with. And it also helps people see where they can actually contribute. You don't want to just do this sort of like social media highlight reel of, hey, here's the perfect team. You know what I mean? Then first of all, that's inauthentic. And then second of all, if you don't show areas where you could use help, you're not going to get it. So I think that you really need to think about that. All right, so that's perception. Really think about quarterly business reviews when it comes to perception. Now let's talk about something that came up in many other of my Martech leadership interviews, is opportunity cost. The idea of opportunity cost. I wrote a post a few months ago on a metaphor that explains opportunity cost. So I'll explain it to you now. So let's say, for example, you got this football field or the soccer field, and there's a bunch of different boxes. Okay, you have these blue boxes which are worth $100, orange boxes which are worth 20, red boxes that are worth 5, and green boxes which are worth 1. And they're just scattered all across the football field. Okay, and for those of you that don't know or don't play sports, football and soccer fields are very large. Okay, it takes a while to walk across them. Now, if I told you, hey, you have 60 seconds to pick up as many of these buckets as you can, or these boxes as you can, and you get to keep the money in the boxes, what do you do? Okay, and from that metaphor, it's very easy to know that we would go straight for the blue boxes. It's the best thing to do, right? Now, Does it mean we completely ignore the $20 boxes and the $5 boxes? Not really. You know, what we can do is, let's say we're running to a $100 box, we can pick up some 20s along the way, or maybe even a 5, right? We're not losing time. But the idea of opportunity cost is, if I head in the direction of a 5 when I could be going into the direction of 100, that's the cost. We're losing the 100 in exchange for the 5. So it's a really great, really helpful analogy, because this is what is happening in work, right? We have these different projects that we're working on that are worth 100, but unfortunately, too many marketers are losing those hundreds because they're going after the 5s or the 1s, unfortunately. So, you know, this was a good quote that I talked to Nick Bonfiglio, CEO of Syncari. So he says, focus on quality over quantity every time. You can test programs that generate engagement, but what I want you to really focus on is initiatives that drive qualified opportunities. And he told me that he wants his team to focus on activities and projects that they know are going to drive opportunities with at minimum 25% chance of closing or higher, right? So there's already a dollar figure and a forecasted deadline or close date for these opportunities. You know, a big problem that I get, or a big pushback that I get, especially from Martech practitioners, marketing ops folks, around this concept of opportunity cost is, you know, some people will say, well, you know, what if I went after this $1 opportunity or $1 project, and then it amazingly turned into 100? You know, we don't know, that might happen. And my answer to that is, there is a small chance that your $1 box will turn into a $100 box, right? But that is a very, very small chance. You know, that'll happen 1 out of 100 times, right? Majority of the time that doesn't happen. And if it did happen, to be honest, what really happened there was that you didn't scope out that project correctly. That's really the thing. There's really ways, like there's this product management framework called RICE, which I encourage you to look up. And this really helps you gauge if this is worth 100 or if it's worth 5. So these magical things that we expect to happen if we work on low value projects, it's not like, it's very true. Serendipitously, something may happen, but you don't want to leave it up to chance. You don't want to leave your career, and you don't want to leave your goals up to chance. Focus on the hundreds, and you know, you're going to be way ahead of the crowd if you do that. So that's what I want to talk about when it comes to opportunity cost. Part 3, let's talk about business outcomes and tying our projects to business outcomes. You know, when I think about business outcomes in Martech, I think about the word translation. And here's why I have this picture up. So this picture is what happens behind the scenes at a concert or a play. And, you know, whenever I go to a play or a concert, you know, all you see is the front of the stage. And, you know, in the back, you can imagine a few things that happen, like maybe behind the scenes or backstage, there's a few pieces of furniture, people are getting ready, you know, maybe there's like a fake tree or something. And that's kind of what you imagine as being back there. But it always amazes me to look back here and see, like, whoa, it's literally larger than the actual, you know, than the actual auditorium. You know what I mean? There's so much that goes, and so many people that go into creating this production, and it wouldn't be the same without it. So the problem here is when it comes to leadership, when it comes to other stakeholders that don't understand, they're only seeing the front part of the stage. When it comes to your marketing efforts, they're only seeing the landing pages, they're only seeing the emails, the webinars, etc. They don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And that is our responsibility now to actually walk them through step by step, and show them what that means. One example that I remember doing was, this was several years ago, and I was working on a centralized lead routing project. And, a quick explainer. What I was doing was we were moving our system from a decentralized lead routing system to a centralized lead routing system. With a decentralized lead routing system, every campaign will route leads. So when you generate a webinar, when you generate leads from a webinar, the marketer then has to go and assign them to the right salespeople or use some sort of workflow to assign to salespeople. That's a decentralized lead routing. Centralized is where you run campaigns and there's something that routes the leads for you based on triggering events. I completed this project. It took me several months, and across thousands of different marketing programs to finally make centralized lead routing. I explained this to my boss and the team, and I was met with blank stares. This was a much smaller team that I was working on, so different than when I was working at Amazon. But I remember someone almost falling asleep when I was trying to explain what this did. The second time around, this really worked a lot better. And what I did was I used a metaphor. I said, hey, in the past, imagine that every single marketing campaign, had their own delivery person, right? And those people are delivering these leads from each place to the salespeople. And every time we do a marketing campaign, the marketers have to fill out these forms and sign up these leads and ship them directly. And what we've done now and what we've accomplished is we've created one central delivery system that will automatically read packages and deliver it to the right salespeople, ultimately resulting in a 25% reduction in campaign build time and virtual elimination of lead routing errors. And that, I think, really got their attention. So the moral of the story is, we know what to do. Actually, this is the quote that made me remember this. I was talking to Jessica Cow, who's the director of marketing operations at F5, or revenue operations, one of those. She said, figure out what your work will unlock for stakeholders. If you are building something or implementing a new tool, communicate how it will translate to more leads, meetings, pipeline, and revenue. We might be doing the right things, but being able to tie it back to the business reason is the key to success within an organization. And that's such an important concept. You probably are today working on the right things, but unfortunately, and this is something that we just have to accept until it changes. Unfortunately, if leadership doesn't know, or your other stakeholders doesn't know that these are the right things, and then they don't understand the impact that it's making, it's probably not going to go as far as you think. There's this myth that if you just put your head down and you work really hard, good things will happen. And it's not true, unfortunately. It's true some of the times, and maybe it was true when you were studying in school, but it's not true at work. You need to let people know, and you need to advocate for yourself. And tying to business outcomes is one of the major ways to do that. Okay, part 4, team structure. So what team structure should we use? And I talked to many different business leaders about this. One idea is, hey, should we do a revenue operation structure? And revenue operation structure means, we have these different operational groups like sales operations, marketing operations, and customer success operations, and they, report up into a CRO or revenue operations leader. Okay, should we do it like that? The answer is, it really depends. You know what I mean? I think that there's this misconception that because everything should align around revenue, that this is the only way or even the best way to structure your teams. It's not necessarily true. The way that I look about it, whether you do a revenue operation structure or a separate marketing ops or sales ops structure, or you do growth operations, which is like an interesting mix of, I think it's like a hybrid of the two. It's really like a strategy, right? So, this picture, it's like a chess strategy. So this picture is from the Queen's Gambit, which is a much more interesting picture than if I just showed a chessboard. But if you think about chess, right? And for those of you that enjoy chess, there's like the Queen's Gambit, for example, is the name of a strategy that you do at the beginning of the game. And it's where you exchange or you sacrifice your pawn in order for a better position. That being said, the Queen's Gambit is not applicable in all games, right? You use it for a certain purpose, and it changes the way that you're going to play the game. It's the same with team structure. If revenue operations is the strategy that you want to use to sort of get your go-to-market function aligned, well, that's great. If your company already has great natural alignment around goals, teams, and people, you may not need to do that, right? And I think that's a key part that people need to understand. At startups and at companies where they're struggling with a lot of infighting, merging the teams might make a lot of sense because the shared goals and the shared leadership naturally aligns people. But, for example, I'll just explain, at AWS, we don't have that structure. We've always prided ourselves on being very customer obsessed or customer oriented. So all of us naturally know what the most important thing is, and that's the customer. So we're naturally all aligning toward there. It also doesn't work as well because the scale is large enough where you have, hundreds of people in each department. So it doesn't really make sense to group them all together. There's enough specialization jobs to do that. Anyway, I think I need to move a little bit faster, don't I? So this one is from Tao. Good one. I interviewed her as well. So she says, I want my teams to know that it's important to empathize with sales. Sales is laser focused on their current deals and don't have the time to read all of our marketing material. Make it easy for them, summarize key points, consolidate all resources for them in one place, and identify ways for them to hit their targets. I think my takeaway here is you don't necessarily need to report to the same leader as sales or as sales operations in order to help them. I think that if you understand that sales is trying to have high quality conversations to convert prospects into customers, and we know that that's going to be beneficial for the business, we need to do the things and take the steps so that they have the material and the intelligence and the data to actually do that in a really efficient way. And then that helps everybody. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. My last point is work overload. So with work overload, this is something that Martech practitioners will raise their hand and really think about. And whenever I talk about this concept to Martech leaders, this is the resounding thing. And yes, that you may be in a scenario where you don't have enough resources, and it's up to us to fight and provide the business justification for those resources. But we also have to balance that with this fact, is that at successful companies and successful people and effective professionals, all of them actually have too much to do. We all have too much to do, right? I probably have 100 emails that just came in during the time of this webinar. So it's not different, right? But and that's why prioritization becomes so important, because the things that matter least should never give way for the things that matter most. And you'll find that there's always enough time to do the most important things. I also find that when you go through this exercise, if there's something that's not getting done that's important, the business will magically start to move around to make that happen. You know what I mean? Whether that's hiring more people or you get more funding. If something needs to happen, it'll definitely happen. I came across this advice recently in a Harvard Business Review article, and it's something that I try to apply when I tackle these lack of resource problems or really tough work problems. And it's the advice is to ask yourself this question: what would the manager that you most admire do in this situation? And I really like that because it helps you step outside of yourself for a second and practice a little bit of objectivity, because I think we get a little bit close to our work. And it also helps you just think that, it's just a really cool, I think, even like motivational exercise where you say, oh, like I had this manager a few years ago, incredibly smart, would always come up with something, like what would he do in this situation? And then something usually comes. So I encourage you to think objectively about your work, especially when you're feeling overloaded, and ask yourself that question and others to help you sort of prioritize and come up with innovative solutions to get the most important things done. All right. So in summary, the most important things that Martech leaders want you to know: it starts with perception. Remember, it's up to us to shape the perception of Martech within our organization. Ladder your work up to top business outcomes. Okay, make sure that you're tying your work to the top business opportunities, and also make sure that you're translating that work in ways that people that don't necessarily understand technology understand. Team structure is a strategy, and there's different strategies to win. They're not nearly as important as goals and alignment, but choose your strategy carefully, because it does change the way you play the game. And finally, look at your work objectively. Everyone has a lot of stuff to do. You're not being personally, I have to remind myself of this too. You're not being personally attacked with overwork. To be honest, we all are. So, but knowing that, how are you going to be different? How are you going to handle this deluge of work? And how are you going to come up on top, achieving the most important things? All right. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. That's it. And yeah, thank you all so much. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but
yes, we
that's the end of my...
do have time for questions. So if people have any, please submit them in the Q&A button below. We do have some that streamed in, and this webinar is about insider advice, but what is the question that you get asked most often by people looking for advice?
Let's see. That's a tough one. I think one thing that I get asked a lot is actually just around how to break in to Martech and actually how to grow your career in Martech. So that's a question that I get asked a lot. I think that for me, and that's not necessarily attached to the topic of this webinar, but I do want to address it since it's one I think about a lot. I think at first, especially at the early stages of your career in Martech, it's heavily based on skills, and you'll see like a lot of like content out there about, it's all about attitude, or it's all about what's it called, attitude or enthusiasm or something like that. That is actually a false dichotomy, meaning that you can actually have both. You can actually have skills and a great attitude. It's not like you have to have like one or the other. Yeah. So your skills actually very much differentiate you early in your career. And if you can learn some of these very popular platforms, especially marketing automation, especially CRM, if you can learn paid advertising, all of those sorts of things, that can be enough to get you in the door and into a really good job. As you progress, this is when it's actually reversed. As you progress in your career, you'll notice it's actually less and less about platform specific skills and more about how you work with people and how you think about the business overall. You know, how you prioritize your work, how you select your targets, and how you make a plan to achieve them, and how you report that throughout the organization. That's what actually makes the difference between success and failure as you grow. But when you're starting early on, it's more about the hard skills and can you actually get the work done. So I hope that helps with that question.
Well, it leads us to the next question that's submitted. When you talk about reporting, somebody's asked, how do I narrow down metrics that matter? There's, I mean, especially in your world, there's so many metrics you could report on and talk about and show them the plumbing. If you're talking to executives or in the monthly, reviews, how do you narrow it down to the ones that matter?
Yeah. So I think about this a little bit differently. I think that when you're first getting started, it's always a good idea to start like in Excel or a simple spreadsheet, because then it kind of cuts away at the stuff that's there and it helps you focus on stuff that you want to know about and that you think will help you lead in the right direction. So that's the first advice, is you don't want to start with, hey, what does the email marketing tool show me? Or hey, what shows up in this dashboard? Like, don't start there. Start on a piece of paper and determine, how do you know if your programs are working or not? How do you know if you're driving revenue or not? So that's my first part. I think the second part is, when you're measuring stuff, what you'll notice is that the things that you think may be the most impactful metrics actually may not change as much over time as you think. So, one thing that I notice, and we report on global marketing metrics every single week. And it's that, some of the key things like conversion rate and our open rates across the board, the number of campaigns that we're doing, the leads that we're generating, those kind of like have minor fluctuations over time. I think this is once you get going. So you'll notice that you're tracking them over time and they're actually staying pretty steady. So what happens is, once there's any sort of changes, or if you want to drive change within those reports, that's what actually is the information and signal that you need to change the work that you're doing. So that's the first thing that I wanted to kind of call out, is that you're more of like observing what's happening and then making assertions based on what you see. So I think that's a key distinction. And the other thing about narrowing down the metrics is that I think what you're really trying to do is you want to call out the things that you think are most likely to move the needle for the large sort of tier 1 goals that we had in place. And I kind of showed it before. If you're trying to increase new sales, then the tier 2 is increase the extend the reach. And then the other one was increase the conversions. So you want to look at metrics that you believe are going to most likely impact those. And then in order to move those create your projects, and those projects then go on your roadmap for the year. So they're all actually really connected. I wish I could give you a super specific example of what I would do. I don't have one now, but hopefully at least that helps you kind of directionally understand how we pick which metrics matter the most, and what to actually do after you pick them.
And another question that came in, is how do you deal with terminology confusion across systems? Let's say map contacts versus CRM contacts, etc. And it reminds me of the same challenge that one of our customers, Cisco, had in terms of terminology, getting all the business units to understand, what does a campaign actually mean? What does a program mean, and tactics, etc. Just getting everybody on the same page on terminology is a challenge in itself.
Yeah. So you're definitely not alone in this problem. I think it's a pervasive problem across the industry. One is especially because the word campaign actually, I think, is one of the largest, offenders, because campaigns mean something different in, for example, Marketo, Salesforce, paid media channels. The word campaign means so many different things. Whereas I like to think of campaign as more like an integrated, sort of effort across many different channels. System-wise, campaign means something specific. Ideally, you're working with, if I had to start from scratch, I would make sure that the people on my team were, had the experience and expertise to be able to naturally differentiate these things. This makes it a lot easier. The way that but even for me right now, that's not the case. The way that we're dealing with it right now are these things called knowledge sessions. And so each month we're setting up I'm hosting some of them. We're also inviting other teams to come on and start to explain what all of these things kind of really mean. And we're using that as a mechanism for expertise sharing. And I just did a session a few weeks ago, and we literally covered this topic. This is what campaign means in Salesforce. This is what campaign means in Marketo. This is what campaign means in these other internal tools. So I think that at least that's a start. But yeah, I am, I couldn't be more frustrated at that problem. I don't know why everyone wanted to name everything campaign. I don't know why they named them the same things. It's so bad. But yeah, that's my advice. And if anyone else has advice, I'm all ears, because it's definitely a problem we're facing too.
We have time for one more question before we go into a product demo at the end of this webinar. Is somebody's submitted, I'd love to be more strategic and get past just putting out fires every day. Realistically, how can I do that?
So this is a tricky one. So there's two things that I think that could really help. One is, if you can get buy-in on a list of projects that you commit to working over or a certain time period, you can use that as your personal roadmap to actually defend your time. I think that's a really important one. The other one, and I hope you'll take this in stride, because I went through this exact same thing. A lot of times there's some self-reflection that has to go in here. And it's that everything isn't as important as other people make it out to be. And a lot of times the putting out fires thing comes from a people-pleasing mentality. And I say that, as being, authentic and candid and almost vulnerable, because I felt that same way, where it's like, as soon as a leader says, this is super important, as soon as a salesperson says, this is super important, it becomes a fire and we need to do it. And it's the top priority. When in reality, sitting down and saying, no, like, the impact is going to be this, and what I'm working on is more important, is such a hard conversation to have. It's so much easier to say we're going to do that. It's so much harder to do it in practice. So starting small, I think, with managing stakeholder communication and giving yourself space every time a request comes in, establishing SLAs. On our team, we've been able to get buy-in for a 5-day response SLA. So that means that when these come in, we literally say, look, if it's not marked as a certain severity, we're not even going to respond to you in 5 days, because we're working on stuff, and then they have to respect that. So those are some boundaries too that could help. But I feel for you. I know you can do it. Just keep working at it, and you'll be able to get into a good position of not fighting fires all the time. There will always be fires, by the way, but you won't have to do it 20 or 40 hours a week.
Yep. So we do want to conclude this webinar in the last 10 minutes with a demo, because this topic is about really elevating Martech practitioners. And we've got a product demo where Stephanie here can show us how we can ladder up everyday projects to corporate goals, and how we can take a look at how performance impacts revenue, all kinds of, let me just, forgot to share my screen there. So we're going to spend the next 10 minutes. We'd love for you to stay on and listen to the demo and see how you can be more strategic using the Brandmaker Marketing Operations Suite. Stephanie, I'll let you share your screen now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where in the world you are. I'm a senior solutions engineer on our global pre-sales team, and I'm going to take you through the Hive9 platform. So let me work on sharing my screen. Just to give you a little bit of background, and then we'll start going right through. Hive9, what we do is we manage the business of marketing. So our solution is going to provide marketers with the clarity to enable their teams to focus on the right actions that accelerate growth. And so we get folks out of spreadsheets and bring the entire marketing plan into an intelligent, shareable calendar, which gives visibility, provides insights, and enables teams to collaborate around their plan. And there's an element also of predictive modeling so that your plans have integrity, and if properly executed, the impact of your plans meets the goals that you put forward. Now, let's take a look at getting you out of spreadsheets as that foundation and into this collaborative environment. Planning, again, it's the foundation. It informs us of what we'll be doing, but it points us in a specific direction and leads us to our goals. So when I'm in my planning environment within Hive9, I have a few different views of my marketing plan. But in each of my views, there's a consistency in that I have a hierarchy in place. I have my plans at the highest level. When I expand that, I show my next level down at the campaign level. Here I have this representing the 3 markets that I'm targeting. As I continue to expand out my hierarchy, I have my marketing programs. And then within each of my programs, I have all of my tactics that marketing is executing. And I can expand that further to see my line items, my cost elements within each of my tactics. And so from here, in one of my views, I can very easily see how my tactics are consuming budget with my costs from the lowest level rolling on up. Now, the other benefit of this hierarchy is the platform supports advanced segmentation, meaning marketers can do a meaningful analysis of their plans. We do so with the various filters that I have, but also the ability to pivot my plans. I can view my plan costs in this example through the lens of any attribute, such as persona, industry, tactic type, to name a few. And so as I do this now, when I'm going to have conversations with, say, executives in the organization, or I'm looking to filter to a very specific view of my plan, I can now view my marketing activities, my tactics, by industry in this example. I could even take it a step further if I wanted to and filter down to geography and industry. So now I'm focused on fewer segments. More importantly, segments that are focused on my company's specific strategy. If our CEO says, hey, we're doubling down on the financial services sector this year, my plan should reflect that. As I back out and return to my original view of my hierarchy, let's also continue on the theme of visibility. Not only am I able to view my plan costs or view my plans through an Excel spreadsheet-like experience, I also have a marketing calendar where my hierarchy is maintained, but instead of viewing just my plan costs, now I'm viewing my tactics that are in market at which time, color-coded by tactic type for the time frame that I've selected. Having this structure in place with color coding of tactic types enables easy calendar visualization, reduces the redundancies in my plan. And from here, I could even share my calendar in a link to subscribers who do not need a Hive9 license. So for example, if I'm a marketer and I want to share this with my sales teams or with executive leadership, I'm keeping everyone up to date on marketing's activities. And additionally, I can click on a tactic where I can engage in the pop-up to show fields that my organization has deemed should be made available in my view. So if I want to view how are my $25,000 of planned costs being spent across my line items for this activity, then I would be able to go in and view additional details further. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into that tactic today. For anyone who is interested in a deeper dive, I'd love to have that type of session with you and have a conversation. But when I do open that tactic, I'm going to be able to see information or attributes regarding this tactic. We support custom and unlimited segmentation through attributes at each level of the framework, with support for multiple selections, dependencies, and formulas to ensure that your plan is balanced and aligned to the overall strategy of the organization. Now, last but certainly not least, we're going to take a look at the performance management piece. So when we take a look at our plans, but then we look at the actual performance, we're also predicting the performance for the year. So in my view, I can look and see what have I actually done up to today, and then projecting out across the year compared to my goals. But the question is, how does it project? Every single plan in Hive 9 is backed by a revenue model. That revenue model is going to understand waterfall conversion stages and rates, stage velocities, and average deal size. It can be modeled for different markets, geographies, and more. And that model allows us to predict the results of the plan. So by looking at the way things look now, what's come in through the month of May, now we're on June 1st, we're going to project what our plan year looks like. And I'm projected to perform fairly well. But we're halfway through the year. How can I continue to make an impact on this percentage? So we have plenty of time to do that. We're going to take a look at the section below, which is where we can see our performance to date segmented across any of the plan segmentation showcased with these metrics: revenue, costs, performance, and ROI. And to use a real example, if I want to take a look at the performance details by audience, I can see I have a massive lag in the executive influencer. All of the fields that I use to pivot my attributes fully configurable. So let's say I want to take a look at vertical now. And as my chart updates, this might tell me that I'm also lagging in another area. So say, for example, I want to look at manufacturing. I have a lag in manufacturing. I could even switch this again to look at geography, and it might tell me that I have a lag in EMEA versus a strong performance in North America. Now, as a marketer, I have the insights to further investigate, say, the messaging to the executive influencer in the manufacturing industry and in EMEA. Continuing on down at my summary report, I have waterfall performance at a very high level. So first, we'll see the volumes at each level being produced. And then we're taking a look at the relevant conversion rates. Now, again, this is a high level. I'm still projecting out my performance and I can engage with my graphs. But if I want to take a look under the hood and get even more granular with my details, I want to see my inquiry stages of the waterfall and predicting the impact of each stage for the year. And as I look at this now, my projected compared to my goals is very similar. So it looks like I have one line projecting out. I can also engage with the bars and hovering over this to see my numbers. From there, to really make an impact on my plans, as I go further down, I have my plans, my campaigns, my programs, and my tactics all stack ranked by stage performance. And so what this does is it gives you the insights to make decisions on which tactics to defund, which ones to provide with newly available funding. Any investment changes that you make will be immediately reflected in the predictive reporting. And I can use this from here to go back into those tactic details and engage in a commenting feature where I can @reference other users and continue to collaborate within the platform. So we've gone full circle right back to planning. Now, Tao, I wanted to make sure that I left enough time at the end to say that if anyone is looking for a deeper dive into Brandmaker solutions, we're happy to have those conversations, schedule one-on-one meetings to understand your lay of the land and how our solution would best be able to meet your needs, and leave enough time also for anyone who needs to run to their next meeting. So Tao, back over to you.
Great. So I'll just share my screen, staff. Thank you for that, being able to connect projects to revenues, connect those dots. That was great to see. I want to first thank Daryl so much for the insightful webinar today. I know he'll be back in the fall to share more best practices and insights. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us today. I know it's a lot of time out of your busy schedules because everyone's fighting fires or working on high priority projects. So thank you. And please look for the next webinar in our Marketing Accelerator series.